the theme of mobility stability is our orientation for today. And the idea is that there's a relationship between these two words, and it's not either or, it's both and. But that in any moment, mobility is perhaps more foregrounded and stability is more underneath. It's not that it's vanished, it's just that it's not the thing that is maybe coming out into your attention. And so that we can understand mobility and stability in this dynamic relationship on a kind of continuum. And I mean, we're dealing with change all the time. We're moving all the time. So we can think of movement and change in this ongoing relationship of mobility, stability, in which you need both. And so as an organizing principle, we get to differentiate these, and that's what happens through a sort of developmental progression. You know, you're kind of engaging with something that is more mobile, something that's more stable. And it's really not about like either holding on or letting go. Rather, I mean, okay, images make sense here, right? So if we think of a stone, it has a complete appearance of stability. It's very solid, it's not walking around. It's really not blowing in the wind much unless it's a really strong wind. But at the kind of subatomic level, the particles are really dynamic. And the stone is a really nice reminder of that we have to be stable, there must be some mobility as underlying support. Hence the kind of very dynamic cells keeping the stone. And to be mobile, there must be some stability for the ongoingness. And so that's how we'll explore it today, is these kind of overlapping, interconnected themes and ideas in a non-dual perspective. That's what the both and kind of principle is, rather than a kind of either or binary separated. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about mobility stability. And it's quite nice to think about examples in the world that have both. So obviously water, when it's in the sea coming out of the tap, it's very mobile, but when it's frozen it becomes more stable. There we see really a kind of pair of opposites of the properties of water, but it's still water. We might also think about the kind of properties within one entity. So the tree looks like it's fairly stable, but it has some give and take, it has some flux and mobility of the trunk, even of the branches, so that its whole structure is organized into the ground and into the sky with gravity and with like a push away from the earth in this ongoing dynamic relationship of its own seeking of nutrients and giving back out, and its symbiotic relationship with its environment. So mobility, stability, all going on all the time, and we'll play with it as we have been in previous weeks with some quite simple activities of lying, rolling, sitting, standing, travelling. As ever, make it comfortable. Don't feel like you need to push anything, rush anything. You can be more stable or more mobile whenever you like, but I'll give us some things to play with in terms of the duration of these or the intensity of them. And we'll play with some principles of breath support and of weight and a bit of shape intent to do that. I don't know why I'm rubbing my knuckles together like this, creating some strange friction in my own mobility. All right, please bring yourself to the ground if you're not already there. You might want to lie down, come into contact with the ground. And let's play with a rhythm of breathing where inhaling is more stable, if you're still, relatively still. And then as you exhale, you might make a gentle shift of weight. Inhaling still. And your exhaling is some movement. Now that could be more rolling, more of a change of base of support. Or it might be more of an imprinting of some part of you into the ground. Inhaling is relatively stable, exhaling to move. And of course, it's impossible to be entirely stable with an inhale because your whole system is responding to breath. But that you mobilize through the exhale. And for a while, we will keep quite low to the ground. So it might be rolling, or if rolling isn't really available to your body or your environment right now, you can also play with it in sitting. But we will all come to sitting in a moment. Whatever movement you like to do, as usual, a sense of movement for connection to self, to now, to ground. And then let's swap that rhythm over. Inhaling to move, pausing as you exhale. Inhaling to mobilize, to roll, to push. Exhaling to pause. And you can initiate from the inhale, sensing the whole of your body responding to breath. And if you'd like something a little bit more familiar or codified, we can play with the X's and the O's. Inhaling to move, exhaling to pause. How is it to find the enclosing with an inhale? So a little bit more breath coordinating stillness and movement. And let's put that into the heel rock. Let's find an inhale to heel rock, exhale to let go of the movement and find yourself in passive weight. Inhaling to find heel rocking, and then exhale to release the movement. And then swap it around. Inhale in passive weight, in stillness. And then exhale with a heel rock. And notice for yourself whether there's any differences between that. Do you feel more parts moving as you exhale or as you inhale? Or is there not much difference between them? And then go ahead and please find a heel rock with whatever breathing you would like. No need to hold the breath here. And let's use heel rock for a moment to explore mobility, stability. So clearly the heels are having to anchor on the ground. They're imprinting, we could say, further into the earth in order to find this rock. So there's some weight activation there. But we get a great example of mobility through stability in this example. How heel rock is gliding us headward and tailward from this increase of pressure through heels, this push. Can you soften the front surface of your body even more? Can you soften the back surface of your body even more? And you can experiment with arms in different places, low, shoulder height, palms down, palms up, depending on what feels good today. And you're welcome to pause, heel rock whenever you wish. Recuperate from all of the mobilizing. And then when you start again from a pause, it's up to you whether you start it through an exhale or through an inhale. Just choose one of those for yourself. So a sense of breath as an initiation for action, mobilizing through an inhale or an exhale. And take an opportunity to scan through your body to see if there are areas that are more responsive to the heel rocking or not. And what I mean by that is maybe there is somewhere around the chest or around the breastbone that could let go a little bit more through collarbones. Maybe it's all the way up at the jaw, so the head can nod and the tongue can be heavy in the mouth. Or maybe it's lower down into the pelvis. What might be able to let go a little bit through the organs of the belly. And you could also explore heel rock with the feet flat on the floor. So there's a relationship here between mobility and active and passive weight, we might find. When parts of the body are more passive, maybe movement can travel through them more easily. Go ahead and tense up some part of your body and just see what that does to the mobility in that area. And then let it go and see how the movement flows. So you might grip the muscles of your belly and hold your pelvis stable, and then let them go and see what that rock feels like. Obviously, if it feels like stressful or painful to increase tension in somewhere in your body, no need to do it, don't bother. You can still sense into mobilizing and releasing without that process. But you can differentiate through increasing tension, through my chest or through my kind of pectoral muscles or my shoulder blades pinning down my back. What does that do to my heel rock? And then let go. Even just scrunching up the muscles of your face might do something. Even making fists with your hands might give you another experience of heel rock. And then when you let your hands go, what else changes? And as ever, recuperate, pause whenever you wish. We'll be here only for a little bit longer. And maybe exploring just the right leg. And then just the left leg. And you may already notice that your leg to pelvis relationship is slightly different on one side to the other. There might be more of this up-downness through the ilium, through the whole of the side of the pelvis on one side, and the other side doesn't move at all. You might want to give that a little jiggle, see what else it can do, just to see. Again, movement as research, as exploration. And you're mostly receiving instructions from me of how you direct your changes, but you can really, if you find something that you're really interested in or get some sensation from that is curious, cool, stay with that, go with that. And we can take legs a little wider, arms above head into this big X position. Let's find this diagonal X rock, sending the movement through from heel, through pelvis, through into spine, so that maybe you can sense your opposite shoulder blade and even the hand moving on the ground. And finding the other heel. And so my leg is a little wider than in parallel, but my heel, the center of the back of my heel is on the ground, so the leg is more knee up to the ceiling rather than externally rotated. I can do it both ways, but for now, I'm keeping the knee up to the ceiling. And here, swapping whenever you wish. You might find that one of these diagonals through your body has more mobility in different parts, more sense of throughness. Okay, this is a lot of rocking. So maybe we pause there. Take a deep inhale and let's exhale to roll to one side. And inhale onto your back. And exhaling, rolling to the other side. Let's push up to sit. And coming back into the ground, into a big X. Rolling to one side, pushing yourself to sit. So I'm sitting in a kind of figure 4 position with my legs, or a kind of fourth position. One side of my pelvis isn't on the ground. It's really not about getting totally flat here. It's about finding actually more about this transition from a small ball into sitting and then coming back into the ground, opening to a big X. Small ball, push to sit, back into a small ball, back into a big X. So here we have actually the return from thigh lift feeling. This action that we sometimes do in this position. This is just a simple flex of the, or extend through the thigh. And then it comes back in, and you're into the ground. So I'm curious about how we can use this theme of mobility stability to find level change now. Pushing into the ground to stabilize some part of my body. And for this moment, it's my forearm into my hand, into my pelvis, in order to mobilize through spine, through skull, and also this mobile upper leg. And then I can come back into the ground, and into a big X. And I'm using my top arm, the arm that's not pressing into the ground. I might use that to circle me, give myself a bit of spatial intent here, to support my head coming off the ground by seeing my hand. I could alternatively look down at my hand if I wanted to, or I could even take the arm up over my head, finding an arm circle in a different part of my space. It might feel more stable to stay low to the ground, but equally you might find some different kind of freedom through your spine if you mobilize in the up space whilst level changing. And so what might just feel like a sort of fancy add-on of the arm can actually feel more integrated if you use your eyes. So it's not coming from nowhere. It's not just like getting up off the ground and your arm is like flinging for no reason. There's a sense of integration of the parts here as the whole of you changes level. Okay, let's come to sit once again and stay there and maybe extend into wide-legged position. And let's take some circles through the heels so we find a rock through pelvis. And your hands can come behind you. And so here we are shifting from right to left, from front to back. A bit of mobility through pelvis and then the other way. And again, if this is a lot of mobilizing for you in a way that makes you feel nauseous, you can go a lot slower. That's also possible. Or you could pause whenever you wanted. And reinitiate with breath. Just moving on the exhale. Or just moving on the inhale. For those of you going super quick mobilizing, pause. And let's play with finding just the right leg doing those same circles through the metatarsal, through the toes, on the heel. You can take your arms to the side and just notice what you notice about the two halves of your body. So you've got one side that is more mobile, through pelvis, through leg. Our rib cage on that side feels like it's maybe connecting with the air slightly differently. And you can go the other way. And my arms are just out to see what happens through my shoulders, through my arms, maybe any extra movement that wants to happen through the arm as a result of the leg. And the opposite side could be really passive, could have some sort of spatial intent in it. Could feel heavy, could feel light. And then just pause and notice what you notice between your two halves. And then let's explore the other side. So how is it through sitting to kind of mobilize body half, right? So we have the principle of developmental pattern support here. There's a bit of an lower to upper sequencing through that whole left side. Sensing into what you notice through the shoulder blade, through that leg to hip socket relationship, pelvis into spine. If this is really uncomfortable for your lower back, you're always welcome to sit on a cushion for something like this. You might feel that things are starting to get more overly stable in other parts of your body to make it happen. Maybe it's nice to prop yourself up with your hand, that's also fine. If you haven't changed direction, change direction. Okay. And then just take a little moment to pause. You might want to adjust your legs or recuperate in different positions. And just notice what you sense in a moment of stillness. About the sensations of your body. And let's play a little bit with knee drop, coming through to tabletop. And then we'll take a lateral pelvic shift to get ourselves back to sitting, back to knees on the ground. So I'm taking knee drop and then quite a profoundly large lateral pelvic shift, mobilizing my pelvis over my shins. And I'm going to come back the way I came. Now, if your knees are not happy about this, put loads of cushions underneath. You might just get that far with hands on the floor. That might be totally sufficient. You might even just get this far. Also fine. But if you want to and can, come all the way over into tabletop. We get to play with lateral pelvic shift, return from thigh lift, return from knee drop. Lateral pelvic shift. Here we have a closed chain arm circle as my arm is spiraling inward on the palm as pelvis comes down and I come back. So mobilizing through shoulder girdle, mobilizing through side of spine to make space for pelvis, stabilizing across this moment here of symmetry. I'm using a sense of evenness between my 2 feet and back of pelvis as an idea of stabilization before I then travel onwards. Pelvis goes. thigh lift, knee drop, thigh lift, pelvis. Breath support will help you here. And you might find that your lateral pelvic shift one way is a lot easier than your lateral pelvic shift the other way. You can have a little go on your own, seeing how far you can go. I mean, I have to slide a little bit to get there. If I'm more true to my alignment, then I don't get quite so far. And what I mean by that is, if I go very far and then start to kind of slide, then my shins move. And that's kind of what we're doing in this exercise, of the level change and the weight shift. But if I just look at the lateral pelvic shift part, then I don't go quite so far. All right, so this is mobilizing side to side with this body half that we kind of warmed up in sitting. And then maybe let's bring ourselves, when we get to tabletop, slide the leg through. We can either take it sagittally as a thigh lift, or you can take it more round as well, that's possible. To find hand to ground, pelvis behind you. And again, if that's too much for your knees and you want to make a modification, you can find the leg coming up, but just not going further. So you might get that feeling of the thigh taking over, but not with the level change. And notice what your breath is doing now. There's quite a deep flexion through the supporting knee and a shift sideways across it as the arm is internally rotating, coming up. Okay, next time we come back to, you can lie down and just find a shift side to side and lying, bringing all of that back into the ground, coming into a big X, small ball, big X, small ball. Let's find a moment of heel rock, see how it feels now after having shifted side to side quite a lot. What feels stable to you in heel rock now, if anything? What feels more mobile? For me, returning to the so-called sort of simplicity of heel rock feels actually quite stabilizing. The opportunity to feel my vertical throughness. One dimension. Wow, with a little bit of vertical dimension, with a little bit of sagittal dimension as well. But no longer the complex spatial pulls of what we were just doing. Take a pause, take a moment of recuperation. And then in your own way, we'll play with taking one arm across your body, taking a little reach towards the feet, coming back again. So this might be really small for you. You absolutely don't have to bring head and shoulder blade off the ground. But if you would like to, if that's available, using a bit of spatial intent to start to bring head in shoulder blade, off the ground, and a little bit of rotation. Eventually, you might bring yourself to sitting, but only if that feels like it's kind of possible for your body today. If you're dealing with any injuries or pregnancy, then obviously this is not going to be suitable. And by injuries, I mean anything that would be too exerting for the upper spine or the neck. This might not be quite so nice. There are other core exercises that would serve that kind of situation better. But for those of you doing it, using this cross-lateral connection to bring you up to sit. Sense of curling the arms through this diagonal line, tracing it with your hand, undoing that connection, unwinding, folding through the limb. Okay, that's enough of those. Let's now go into knee drop, thigh lift, return from thigh lift, return from knee drop. So more the parts of what we were doing before, done in this more familiar way. Knee drop, thigh lift, return from thigh lift, return from knee drop. And using this to really taste into where is moving and where is not, and how that conversation between your parts takes place, where something initiates and where something takes over. And does that travel through your body in this successive sequential sequencing? Or is there a sense of one part jumping to another part? Do you start the return from the thigh lift before your feet have got there? Do you delay the return from diagonal knee reach for longer? And then where do you initiate from to make that happen? And how do you sense the middle in between those two things? Do you find a moment of stillness and rest before you go again? Or do you find a kind of swing to the other side, finding the apex of this movement of weight underneath 2 feet evenly to then tip across the pelvis? And so here we might notice the idea of stabilizing through time to find the coordination so that both knees can set off at the same time. And with the momentum of the leg swing. And using momentum for mobility rather than something else. How about if we were to really break this down to knee drop, thigh lift, return from thigh lift, return from knee drop. One phrase feeling like 4. Finding moments of stillness, of relative stability. And I know that as I do that, I feel this kind of underlying movement of what it is to let go into gravity. And I'm having to use a different muscular effort also. maybe becoming aware of my spatial intent more. Okay, that's enough of that. Recuperate however you would like to recuperate. Okay. If you weren't lying on the ground, let's find a transition to sitting, however you like. And if you were already sitting, you can stay there. Let's play a bit with this again. Knee drop, lateral pelvic shift. Eventually coming into your own movement of seated low-level traveling. So you've got the options of hands and feet on the ground, hands and shins on the ground. You also have this orientation of hands and feet on the ground. So weight shifting, but also a little bit of level changing towards the ground and out of the ground. Depending on the space you have, you might travel a little bit. You might even find some little elevation, kind of pulsing a little bit into the hands so the pelvis can get lighter. You might find some hops, if you wish. And eventually you might come to 2 feet, but make it available to go back into the ground for yourself. So coming into 2 feet might mean then reversing and retracing your pathway. How did you get up? And then how might you get back down again? Does getting out of the ground require some more push? If so, to repeat something a few times gives you the opportunity to see where you're stabilizing from and then what mobilizes. Going at a tempo that works for you, about how you make some shifts to get in and out of the ground. And then maybe taking it into some traveling on 2 feet. And maybe just starting with walking is sufficient. But if you're already wanting to find something else, go with what impulse of your body is calling you. We've played quite a bit with this knee drop, thigh lift feeling, and a bit of condensing and expanding. And so it might be nice to kind of translate those actions from the low level to the high level. Knee drop to bring you back into the ground. All this cross-lateral connection through your body to roll you. Or if level changing is not so fun for you right now, you can play with being on 1 foot. Finding some balancing, mobilizing out of your balance. Might be falling, going with gravity, or it might be deliberately softening through your joints. Finding some pause and then softening as a mobilization out of the balance. So here we have a subtle condensing. an echo of our X's and O's on the ground. And here I'm using space to support me, to stabilize me, something that I can move into and I can shrink. My own kinesphere can occupy a lot of itself, or it can shrink. And if you're still carrying on level changing, you might want to spend some time on 2 feet, exploring what the possibilities there are. Of whether you're finding more of a push into the ground to stabilize you, or whether you're finding a reach into space to stabilize you. And always giving yourself this little game of wherever you are balancing to melt in the joints, to condense, to come out of the balance. That's one option, or the other option might be to fall out of your balance. You might put them together, softening and falling. You might find yourself traveling in different directions. Checking in with your breath support. Do you inhale as you soften through your joints? Do you exhale? Play with yourself for the sense of duration. You might really push it, this idea of stability, that you're going to be stable, relatively stable, for as long as you can. And what do you have to keep doing to keep reinitiating being stable? So that it still feels possible and comfortable in your body, and you're not going into excess amounts of tension, but you're still stable. And then you're going to reach a point where it's too tiring, or too painful, or too wobbly, and then you're going to come out of it. Play for yourself with mobilization, whatever tempo, and for whatever duration you would like, a sense of ongoing mobilizing, mobilizing, mobilizing. Anything you wish. And then push it again with a sense of stability. It might be on 2 feet even, it doesn't have to be on 1. But 1 is an interesting challenge, to choose some sort of shape to feel stable in. And to give yourself the time to sense all the subtle movements that go on, to keep finding this as a stable position. And with doing less in movement, maybe you start to feel more of a smaller shape flow adjustments. Maybe you notice how breath support comes in. Your sense of weight in gravity on whatever base of support you're in. How to keep reinitiating this stability. What do you keep having to do in your body? Or in your quality? Or in your attention to space? And then at a certain point, probably some muscles start to say hello. What are you doing? Could you stop doing that, please? You can get out of that. And give yourself another one of those. It might be longer than what I did, it might be shorter, it's totally fine. But give yourself some sort of experiment with some position that you find through moving. You just kind of put the brakes on and then go, okay, what if I was holding this to be painted? What would I need to do to make this stability with a sense of ongoingness? And you can, inside of it, of course, you can play with it a little bit to see, actually, it would be nicer if my weight was more over the ball of my foot than over my 2 feet. And this is a game that you can play in your everyday, whenever you're standing in a queue, whenever you're just doing something where you need to be still for a while. Sitting at the computer, to keep reinitiating some stability. What do you need to do that? And then when you feel like you've had enough of one shape, and that exploration, mobilize, shift, flow, fall. And we'll spend the next 5 minutes or so kind of doing a reprise of the session. So we started low with some breath support, giving us some timing. Mobilizing on the exhale. Or mobilizing on the inhale. And you might be rolling, or you might be imprinting yourself into the ground. Sense of condensing your weight into the surface it's lying on. And then from there we found some more familiar X's and O's. And some heel rocking. And some diagonal X rocking. Mobilizing through this stabilization of heel bone that itself is mobilizing. Finding a bit of level change through sitting, through pushing. And sitting to shift us across the pelvis, finding a lateral pelvic shift onto all fours. Using maybe the arm to mobilize. An arm circle might bring you out of the ground, might help you get back into the ground. And then we also found some seated mobilization through body half. Which helped us go into this level change, traveling through weight shifting, pushing the ground away, mobilizing ourselves through space. Finding balance, condensing away from balance. stabilizing through a push into the ground or a pull into space. Finding a duration of mobilizing into stabilizing and using a duration of stabilizing to really explore how your mobility, stability, duality can be embodied through these little shape flow adjustments, breath support. And then just take it into some walking in the space you're in. Noticing how you sense your body, how you sense your space. Whether in walking you can feel any of those areas that you explored in the heel rock of making them tense and letting them go again. Maybe here's a good place to check in with that. Are you clenching your fists? Are you holding your jaw? Do you feel this vertical throughness coming from the feet up into your whole body? How do you feel your right side and your left side? And this sequencing across the spine, through into the opposite arm. And then take a moment to stand on 2 feet. And give yourself a moment of pause with eyes closed, sensing inwards. Noticing, as we always do, the subtle movements of relative stillness. With any clenching and letting go through your musculature. With being held, suspended between floor, ground, and gravity. In these moments, I always want to kind of express my incredible awe for the body. But yeah, maybe you don't sense yourself with huge awe today. That's fine. All right, let's come back together and have a little conversation if anyone has any questions or comments about the theme of mobility stability.